Hi, I'm Kirsten Donaldson. Welcome to the board. This is Paul Llewellyn. Today we're going to be talking about quality in Agile projects.
Good morning. Just one question before we start. I'd like to ask the people that are watching today how important quality is to them on their current project. So of all the values that your current project imbues, how important is quality? Even if you want a scale, then give it a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest. But please let us know via our online chat. And please feel free to ask us questions as we're going along, and any insights that you want to share with us, please put them up on the chat.
That would be great. So when we're talking about quality on projects, there's a number of ways that we can ensure quality of our output. And there's a couple we want to talk about today. There's one we talked about earlier this morning, Paul, that I've written down on our board here, acceptance criteria.
Yeah.
So you and I had a short conversation about that, and we weren't sure actually whether that was something that did ensure quality. My view was that it is something written by the product owner, possibly in conjunction with other people, that does tell the team to what standard they expect the product to be delivered. What's your view on it?
Well, I often often see the acceptance criteria as mostly the requirements for what the product owner is expecting, and but sometimes there are quality acceptance criteria on there as well. They're expected to be cross-browser tested and so on. And I'm sure you've seen that as well.
Yeah, I have. But actually, that leads us on to another topic we've got on here about the done definition.
That's right.
Because quite often tasks such as cross-browser testing are tasks that need to be performed on every story.
Yeah.
Which is when they generally either become part of the done definition when that's defined at the start of a project, or added later on if it appears frequently on stories. So what impact do you think that the done definition has on overall quality for the project?
I think it's. The done definition is the foundation of the quality values, if you like. And let's just take a step back a little bit, I think, and say what is quality and what we think is quality. For me, we had a workshop last week, and we were discussing it, and the trainer was describing it as the ITs of the project, and the ITs.
Can you remember them?
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
Reliability, maintainability, scalability,
and performance.
Usability and performance.
Performance
was the joke. We had constantly last week was performance is one of the ITs, but that's scalability, I guess, in that sense. So anyway, and we've got different ways of measuring those qualities of the project, obviously. And so usually we have entries on in the done definition which kind of tick those off, if you like.
So for example, for usability, there would be perhaps the cross-browser testing, and that would account for that ITI.
That's right. The usability, that's usability, isn't it?
Yeah.
Of course it is.
Yeah. So what's an example? Can you think of an example that you'd have on a done definition for performance quality?
Maybe we'd talk about time to first byte, i.e. the page loading,
page load time.
How quick the response time is of the web page and so on. Yeah. Performance, there might be, if you've got a number of transactions going on and you want to make sure a high number of concurrent users can use the system, you might do some concurrency testing around the performance, and you might have clear markers, must be 50 concurrent transactions per second or something like that, but there's...
Yeah. So tell me, if you're doing a load testing on development, would you do that sort of at the end of each new feature that's been uploaded, or would you do it at the end of the sprint? How does that work?
It's a good question. It depends on how your teams are organised, I guess. If you've ideally for a Scrum team, the skills would be in the team to be able to do at least some load testing.
So possibly throughout, if you had the skills on the team?
Absolutely.
Throughout the sprint?
Because if they're not load testing all the way through, then they've got no idea of how it's going to go when they do. If there is a load test at the end, some organisations will do a lot of testing right at the end of the project. And if there is a load test specifically, or at the end, then they've got no idea how their application is going to respond unless they've done something sooner.
So if you did it perhaps at the end of each sprint, that may have an impact on finishing the stories in that sprint, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you may end up with a situation where you're consistently rolling stories over into the next sprint.
Yeah. Yeah.
What effect do you think that would have that on the team if you were consistently rolling stories over?
Demoralisation, total demoralisation.
Yeah. It's not a great place to be in, is it?
No. I mean, that's the thing with Agile, especially Scrum, where you're trying to deliver value as quickly as possible. We want to move as fast as we can, and so we have to build in practices that support that moving fast. And
actually, I mean, moving fast is also another way of ensuring high quality. So, for example, smaller batch sizes reduce the variability. It's much easier to pick up issues and things like that on smaller batch sizes. You get to see them a lot quicker, and it's just another one of the things that we use, isn't it?
That's right. And so when something breaks, you go back. You stop. You identify the problem. You fix the problem, and then you carry on. And you've only got a very small batch to fix. Yeah.
So, I mean, really, the team takes ownership of quality on a project, don't they?
That's right.
So I mean, it's for a Scrum team being self-managing, they decide how the work's carried out, and they decide about their engineering practices and things like that. So part of that is looking at their testing practices as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
And this is something you've been involved in quite a lot as a developer on projects previously, right?
Yeah.
So what sort of practices might a team decide to adopt to ensure code quality, for example?
The practices we use here essentially come from XP. They come from extreme programming. XP set up a number of practices which involved, for example, they talked about peer reviewing. A lot of developers peer review their software, and XP came back said, well, if peer reviewing is good, let's do it all the time. So they pair program all of their production code. Everything that goes into production is pair programmed. And it's much more than just peer reviewing, but peer reviewing is a strong part of that process.
Yeah.
And so that's one extreme programming practice that we use here, pair programming.
Okay, we've just got a couple of questions here. Also, John has commented, just got a new iMac, that's quality. Thanks for that, John.
Good work, John.
He also says, what are the different dimensions of quality? I'm not really sure what he means by that. I mean, I guess we're talking about code quality, we're talking about things with the issues that we're talking about before, so usability of the product, if we're talking about software.
That's right. So is that what you mean, John? We could, if we could foster some feedback, some quick feedback from you, or do you mean metrics to measure quality? Just let us know. But certainly there are the different dimensions are usability, scalability, reliability, performance. I keep that word every time. Reliability, and there was one other, maintainability. Yeah.
So the other thing that John has said here is tell us about software craftsmanship, and I think that's something we've just touched on when we're talking about pair programming and code reviewing and items like that that we use to ensure quality code.
That's right. I mean, there's a number of XP has got some core principles which I'll just touch on briefly. There's it uses the idea of simple design, i.e. what's the simplest thing I can do to get this done. It uses the idea of test-driven development, which is a way of designing software. You write your tests first, and what you're actually doing is specifying your code up front. So you're writing your specifications in your tests, and then you're writing your code. And then another principle it uses is refactoring. So this is another part of simple design where you're fitting your code that you've written in with the design of your program. So it's where you elaborate your design, if you like. Mm-hmm. And pair programming is obviously another key principle. And then there's this idea of metaphor or system metaphor, and it's basically a narrative or a way of describing the system in a way that all of the players within the team can understand what you're talking about.
So, for example, plain language.
Plain language.
Yeah, with something to do with product owner who may not be technical, quite often isn't.
And it's a way of it unifies the architecture, and it's as simple as giving your classes meaningful names, giving your objects, and your methods meaningful names. So when you're talking about the, loan book method, everyone knows what you're talking about. How simple is that? I'm loaning a book.
I don't.
And you'd have a borrower class being loaned a book.
Okay, I get it. Yeah.
In the library.
Maybe I need to
I'm talking about a
that.
library system.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's the system metaphor. But those practices allow a team to set up their quality, or allow the team to provide for quality within the project.
Yeah. I was thinking this morning about the role that collaboration plays in quality on projects.
Yeah.
And I think working with product owners as part of the team is a key part in gauging the quality that's required, because obviously we need to know that so that we can meet it. So things like sitting down at the start of the project and working on the done definition together.
Yeah.
Also, simple things such as having discussions, doing sprint planning and clarifying items on stories and just making sure that everything's understood is all part of that achieving quality.
Absolutely. Because if everyone has to be on the same of the same understanding, on the same page.
Yeah.
And so when the team, for example, the reason the done definition is so important for everybody involved to understand is that that's included in the citing of a story. So when all of those quality of all of those items on the done definition have to be ticked off before the story can be accepted, and so that understanding allows the team to size the story and allows the product owner to understand why that story is of that of that certain size.
We've got another question from John. Thanks, John. What tools do we have as an Agile team to ensure quality is built in? I think there's something that's devised at the start of a project by the team, and I'd say again, this may be items like deciding which testing practices to use, such as the test-driven development, behaviour-driven development, acceptance test-driven development as well. Can you tell us a bit about acceptance test-driven development?
Yeah, acceptance test-driven development is also known as behaviour-driven development, but specifically with acceptance testers, the slight difference is that you sit down and you collaborate with the product owner before a story is implemented, and you sit down and you write down a number of scenarios that would which make up the acceptance test for that story. It's as simple as that.
So again, this is in plain language?
In plain language. Yeah. We usually write on an index card or something similar with the product owner, but we use some software called Cucumber here, which is our acceptance test driven development language, if you like.
I'm familiar
framework.
That actually uses Gherkin as the language I understand.
That's right. And Cucumber is the framework.
Yeah.
And that allows us to write acceptance tests in plain English, and obviously there's some slight technicalities underneath it where we're actually writing code to support those tests, but the output is all in plain English, so the product owner could sit there and see those tests running and understand exactly what features we were supporting and which scenarios we're passing, and we have a red-green situation, so it's really simple for the product owner to understand what's going on.
Yeah, so some of the Agile practices that we use, John, as opposed to technical practices to ensure quality, are things like the pair programming, refactoring, retrospectives, which we can just touch on now actually. Retrospectives, obviously they allow the team to get together on a regular basis at the end of each sprint to look at what's gone well and what hasn't gone so well during the course of the sprint, and look at how they can improve things. That's another way of ensuring that we're trying to achieve the best quality we can.
That's right.
And that's an Agile practice that we use on a regular basis to ensure that quality is being met.
And because the team's self-organising and they decide how they're going to implement the backlog, they decide which tools they're going to use. So often that comes up in the retrospective. For example, I was working with a team that had a separate tester. So they had a team member who was a tester, and he wrote all of the acceptance tests. He was really struggling to understand what the system was doing, and he was talking to the business analyst, he was talking to the programmer, not really getting the answers he needed, not getting the time that he needed to write the tests, and test the software in time before the sprint finished. So they collaborated quite closely. The way the team worked it out was the tester would sit down with one of the programmers from the beginning of the story, and they would write tests as the programmer was coding.
Yeah.
And so it's very similar to pair programming, but the tester was writing tests.
Yeah. So there's a great way of getting some more cross-functional stuff happening within a team as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because obviously the developer's learning from the tester, and the tester's also learning from the developer about the code.
Exactly, and so the programmer was learning what the tester was looking for, and was able to write code that satisfied those requirements as the tester. So the tester said, "Well, I'll be testing this case, this scenario, I'll be testing," and so on. And the programmer could, we said, "Well, I didn't think of that. I can write, we should do this and this," and it's essentially.
It's also quite an economical way of working, isn't it? Rather than separating it into those sort of phases. Developers done the code, they hand it to a tester. If you're working together, it just works really well in terms of the best use of time.
Yeah. Another something that came up last week on a workshop is the trainer was saying we don't use 3-week sprints, and for good reason. Why we don't use 3-week sprints is because you often see stories which the first week is stories about analysis, the second week is stories about development, the third week is stories about testing. So it becomes that sort of more ad hoc, waterfall style of development. Which we're trying to avoid. Obviously, we're trying to write stories that slice right through. That's right. A piece of functionality, so that you do the design, the user experience, the build, and the testing all in one story. And one of the reasons we're doing that, is to reduce the delays. So when something comes back from testing, in the old system where you had a period of time between a developer working on something and then it being tested, by the time you got the test results back, the developer might have moved on to another project, or they might have been doing something entirely different, and somebody else will be picking it up. There's all of these context switching delays that get built into waiting for something to happen, essentially.
So we've got an item here on our board about simple design. Why?
This is that I mentioned that earlier. This is one of the XP core principles.
Right.
And so that, like I said, was just about doing the simplest thing you could possibly do to satisfy the requirement.
Okay. And of course, if you are doing simple coding, again, it's easier to spot where there might be issues, right? If you're keeping your code quite economical as well.
There's a famous software engineer called Dijkstra who I'm going to paraphrase now and quote really badly, but he said the key to reliability is simplicity.
Which is very valid, I'd say. So I see you brought a book along with you today, Paul. Do you want to tell us about it?
I did. This is just I'll hold it up so you can see. We haven't got any titles for this book today. We're winging it. Extreme Programming in Action, Practical Experiences, Real World Projects. We operate a hybrid here of Scrum and XP, and we found the XP component to be really important to driving quality for the team. And the team, obviously they don't necessarily pick up these practices overnight. There is a period of time involved, but we usually found the best way to introduce a new practice to a team would be to find a champion, find someone who's really keen, allow them to work up some examples, and then demonstrate that to pair program with the rest of the team, demonstrate, lead by example, essentially. I mean, this is part of forming a high-performing team, is people trying things and seeing what works best, what gives them the best result, and, that's right,
and what they're all comfortable with, isn't it? I mean, and it really is up to the team to decide how they do that. Obviously, as Agile coaches, we can make suggestions or give guidance, but it's really up to them what they want to do and what works best for them, right? And
Kent Beck said, he thought extreme programming was the only way to do things. If you wanted to be agile, then extreme programming was the way. But I did see him talk, and he was conceding the fact that if most teams that picked up Scrum, for example, would eventually pick up XP practices, and he felt that Scrum was a very entry level approach to extreme programming, which he was really happy with, And I can see his point. Extreme programming does improve the team's capability and of that quality that we want, and the ability to move faster and deliver working software.
So how do we deal with technical debt on projects? Because obviously that's something that has an effect on the quality of the product at the end of the day. In fact, if we could maybe a short explanation of what technical debt is.
Yeah, sure. Technical debt was defined by Ward Cunningham in 1992. It was just a paper he was writing, some observations he made about some system development. I can't remember which system was being developed. And he said, I'm going to paraphrase again, so this is going to be terrible misquoting, but he said delivering first-time software was like going into debt, and the issue was the longer you left the debt unpaid, the harder it got to go back and fix it, or to repay the debt.
It's a great metaphor.
Yeah. And so what he's talking about is people. When software is delivered for the first time, it often isn't. It's not highest quality. It's not been tested, not in those days anyway, and there are always, or inevitably, there's going to be some. I'm trying to think of the word. Sorry, you would have had to make some. It's completely slipped my mind.
So what we're dealing with here with, so for example, you might have a legacy system that's been developed quite some time ago, and there might be some issues that you've been working around for a while in order to keep things moving and get things done. But as I understand it, that is technical debt that you're building up. It becomes more onerous the further down the track you get if you don't start dealing with it. And so even if you started dealing with it as, say, a percentage of the sprint, so you devoted 20% to sorting out this technical debt issue with a legacy system. It's not like you go back and sort the whole thing out in one sprint or anything like that. But if you invest some time, agree to invest some time as a team, and work on it to reduce that technical debt as you go through the project.
Am
I right?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
And the word that I was struggling to find
you found it?
was compromises. Inevitably, you make compromises.
It's interesting. You couldn't find the word compromise.
No, it's terrible. It's anyway. So, and you accept. Some teams will keep a technical debt register. So where they're dealing, like you say, with legacy code that they've inherited from another team maybe, or another project, or they're dealing with compromises that they've made a decision to move forward, and they will keep a technical debt register about, as a way of keeping that on the radar that they've got technical debt to deal with, and most teams will build in a way of dealing with that technical debt in the very near future.
I'm sure it's one of those things that's very tempting to sort of put to one side, but as you say, that's just going to get worse.
Well, the issue you've got with technical debt is maintainability becomes very hard. It's like as a developer, when you're working with very unmaintainable code, it's like moving through treacle. Everything is slower. That if a feature comes up or a story comes up for working in an area of legacy code that has got technical debt in it, you size that story appropriately because it's going to take you longer to complete. And
of course maintainability is one of the issues.
That's right.
So obviously it has an effect on overall quality. If you can't maintain it.
You can't maintain it.
And again, going back to it causes delays, which is something we're trying to avoid when we're working through our sprints. Because delays inevitably incur cost.
And any time not working on the delays in your system is time wasted, apparently.
No soundbite.
But it's so true. Once you're working with code. If you go through it the first time and you know that it's hard to work with it because it's not maintainable, if you don't refactor it then you're just going to cause long-term
future
pains. The next development code is going to take it even longer to develop, and things will just it becomes exponential. It just gets harder and harder over time.
Completely. Okay, is there anything else you wanted to go into today? I think we've covered everything there.
I think we have,
I don't think we have any more questions, so we might wrap it up there for today, but thanks for joining us everyone, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.